What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Accounting Flow podcast brought to you by Financial Sense. This podcast is dedicated to taking a deep dive into accounting firm workflow and processes. Each episode, we will spend 20 minutes interviewing actual accounting firm owners just like you, uncovering specific processes that firm owners and operators encounter on a daily basis and discuss ways to improve them. Let's go. And welcome to another episode of Accounting Flow. Today we have the wonderful, the communal Heather Smith, who is an accountant and storyteller with Anise Consulting. And the topic today is balancing tech and touch, how to personalize client experiences in an automated fashion. Heather, thanks for joining.
Thank you so much for having me on the show, Roman. Really looking forward to our conversation today from Brisbane to Boulder. Boulder, Colorado. Shoot, we're covering the whole spectrum of the world with such an important conversation.
We are. I love it. I love having perspectives from not only across our community, but across the world. It's so fascinating to me. And one of the things that I wanted to bring up that I find interesting is on your LinkedIn, I'm going to read your experience. Okay. So I run a 100% digital practice focused on management accounting. I sit at the intersection of accounting, education, and content creation. I educate the community to positively embrace accounting apps. I would love for you to unravel that a little bit because it's so intriguing to me.
Absolutely. I see a need for something and then just chase after it and then work out how to get paid for it later on. So not necessarily the most commercially savvy person out there. But what I saw was a decade ago, Rod Drury came to me. He said, "Hey," Rod Drury, founder and CEO of Xero, "Hey, can you write a book about Xero so we can have it in the Amazon and the iTunes store?" And so I went ahead and wrote a book called Xero for Dummies. But also during that process, realized that the apps, the ecosystem that was building up around Xero, which is also sitting around Intuit and is also sitting around all the other GLs, was incredibly exciting. And there was so much opportunity for it, but people were actually overwhelmed by it. And I know that my skill set is my background is a trainer. I've taught accounting at universities for years. I've trained thousands of people in small business. And my background is, my skill set is explaining things. So I just kept working out different ways that I could explain the apps or the ecosystem to the accounting and bookkeeping community so that they could embrace them, so that they could see that there was actually humans running those businesses. And as accountants and bookkeepers, we love small business. So see that there were humans running those businesses and how that they could work with them to build solutions that were in turn going to help their client base. And in doing that, I very much sit in the management accounting space. No one wants me to do their taxes. I failed tax. It took me 3 times to pass my tax unit. Okay, so I have a global accounting qualification. So I studied to international accounting standards, and I now hold 3 actual professional qualifications. So I'm so overqualified. But you don't want me doing your taxes. I love the ability to massage the data, get that accurate data in there on a timely basis, massage it so we're surfing information that the business owners are empowered to make better business decisions on, because a business is just a collection of decisions. And the more that we can implement, we can automate those decisions, the more that we can surface accurate data to help assist in making those decisions is really important. And saying that, I also think the gut is really important and should be listened to when it comes to making those decisions, which kind of weaves into the human aspect of this conversation. So I have sort of evolved to clarify that. I have an accounting apps newsletter. I have an accounting apps community with 6,000 plus advanced users, and I have an accounting apps podcast. So very focused on talking on this topic, and I'm very fortunate. I travel around the world talking about it. I've just come back from Birmingham. I'm sitting here with my tiger mug. See there, my tiger mug from Singapore, where I was just the end of last year. The management accounting side is a universal global topic, and
Mhm.
with the automation, the integration of apps, we can do amazing things. And I just like to bring this at a very introductory level and work through that so people can embrace it. And it's very exciting to seeing it happen all over the world.
It is, and it's happening quickly, and there's a change occurring in our industry, where tech adoption is rapidly improving. AI is creating a lot of change in our space, and a lot of what you've characterized is how you educate the broader market on what's happening in this tech ecosystem. Now, to your point, humans are the ones making the decisions. We're selling to humans, we're working with humans. There's an intrinsic nature of creating really quality human relationships. And you talk a lot about community. Um, I'd love to hear your perspective on how you see tech and human interaction moving forward in a really, really quality way, because it's not easy to do or even understand.
Wonderful question. And what I think as humans, so if we kind of just take it one step back, when we talk about the AI and all of the technology that's coming in across us, in very simplistic terms, that's algorithms, which as accountants we understand, and that's data sets, which again, as accountants we understand, and as accountants we have lots and lots of access to lots and lots of different data sets, being our client data, being our own data, being government data. And AI essentially is the intersection of those algorithms and those data sets. As humans, we can, um, what is coming out of that is we can augment it, we can enhance it, and we can amplify how we can actually use it. So when we're working with our clients and we're developing a forecast with them that is leveraging AI and leveraging technology, we can have a real human conversation. And sometimes that human conversation is bringing in common sense, which is not necessarily always common, to the conversation so that they are in a position to understand. They're in a position to go, what you've predicted is reasonable or not reasonable. That's one of the questions
Mhm.
I always ask my clients. Does the data seem reasonable? Because I can bring it to a certain position, but I know I don't have that gut instinct. I know
Right.
that I've not lived and breathed every sale in that business. They have. And I want them to be able to look at the data I give them and go, is that reasonable? And to be able to then in turn listen to them. And if they say no, let's go back in and double check where something has gone. Because sometimes, as you know, one thing gets coded in one area and then all the others do, and it may not have been correct.
Right.
So bringing that human element in and hearing the clients and what they're saying and where they need to go. Um, and that uh, runs in so many sort of different aspects of our conversations with our clients. And I know that I have an accountant. I don't do tax, as we've discussed. Um, I have a tax accountant. I've had the tax accountant for 20 years, and you know what? He can't use technology at all. He's the
Mhm.
best tax accountant you can imagine. He can't use. He gets me in there every time. Heather, how do I do this? He's all thumbs and everything. You know what? He talks to me. He talks to me for
Yeah.
90 minutes every time I go in there, and I have these extraordinary conversations that always take my business to another level because he's kind of been ahead of the curve in that he was behind the curve, and he's all about the conversation. And I
Yeah.
really excited that a lot of technologies are coming along and saying, we're going to automate all of this. Are you okay with that? I'm like, yeah, because that gives me more time to have conversations. And I know some businesses are going, we're just going to get the micro business. We're just going to get those small businesses and we're just going to automate the whole thing and we'll completely remove humans from that process. And that's completely fine. That's lots and lots of little things happening there. But when you've got those bigger businesses involved who want that human interaction, you've got that opportunity to really do something special with them. So augment, enhance, amplify the human input into that relationship.
What I love about that is that You're really hitting on advisory. So there's been a lot of debate as to what CAS is, client advisory services, client accounting services. The definition is beside the point. However, I think the industry, by far and large, thinks of CAS services as something that happens after the accounting process. Here's a deliverable, here's a forecast, here's a report, and it's more deliverable dependent versus the type of relationship with your client. And what I think you're hitting on here that aligns with how I view CAS is that you can have an advisory relationship at the transactional level that helps you advise the business better because you're able now to spend more time to understand the business, to advise them in ways that perhaps those automated processes for those micro businesses that you're talking about can't do.
Yeah, absolutely. So to bring you back, I think it's people in the USA who are having the conversation about CAS. The
Sure.
rest of the world is just calling it advisory. Um, and absolutely, what we had been doing, it really comes back to, and look, I'm an old person. So when I started out in the industry and we were on desktops, it would take 18 months really to get a set of accounts together. It was such a
Sure.
slow process, and you just accepted that as what was possible. So they're really all we could focus on as a small business accountant was that sort of that compliance and that sort of old time of getting any sort of data together, and it was useless.
Mhm.
um, Now we're in a position where the tax work or that sort of work is almost reflecting backwards, and the advisory work is reflecting forwards, and having those conversation pieces around what's happening. And I also think that it's really exciting that if we keep being told we should have more time in the practice, which I hope people are working out ways to do that through 4-day work weeks or ending early or something like that, or moving on D clients because someone wants your D clients, and spending more time thinking about having conversations with clients one-on-one, but also looking at the macro insights which as accountants we
Mhm.
can bring to them. So I know that uh, Zero in the US brings out a state of small business report, which they publish in the UK and they publish in Australia. It's delicious. There's so much great information in there, and you can run through it. And I'm sure other accounting solutions bring that out. I'm just familiar with that one, but you can run through it and you go, okay, this is relevant for this business. How about I have a conversation with them about that and spend some time running through that at a macro level, because the small business owners aren't necessarily doing that because they've got better boots to make or cafes to run or hotels to operate, and they're hoping that they're going to get that from you. They're thinking they're
Yeah.
getting that from you.
And so one of the things that you've hit on is how some of this automation is maybe cherry picking some of this lower level activity that allows us more time to spend with the client, to strategize with them, to advise them. Let's shift into client experience because ideally that scenario allows us to provide the client with a better experience. Where do you start in terms of talking to firm owners on, okay, now this element of your business is automated. Let's go ahead and shift that time over to advisory strategy and a client experience. Like, where do you start that conversation when you have that with folks running firms?
Okay, so how I would like to do it is start with the conversation of how do you want me to communicate with you?
Mhm.
And these are the various ways I can communicate with you, and how do you want me to communicate with you? So I sort of went round in circles saying that because sometimes the client doesn't know, but sometimes they do know. And you can actually automate the questioning of that with some automation. Contact forms as well. But what you then do is you receive in the information that they prefer to have an online meeting with you. They prefer to receive a video from you. They prefer for you to provide it to them in writing. Now, further down there, they've highlighted to you that they have ADHD or they're neurodivergent. So, just as an example. So, what we can do is we can actually get that report and we can run it through a large language model, and the report that we perhaps have written or are generating for them, put it into a format that is suitable for someone who is neurodivergent,
Mhm.
which means it's spaced out, which means it's bullet pointed, which means there's a lot less words in there and things are highlighted in there. And I really love how you then are I'm customizing it for the human, but a lot of that I can actually automate to bring to the human. There are additional AI tools that we can bring in, even though we're humanizing it, the situation. There's a solution called Hey Gen, and I can actually. There are solutions that will read your financial statements and actually make a human voice report on it. I
Mhm.
can make a human voice report on it. I can use a solution like Hey Gen to translate that into another language. So perhaps they speak English, but it's their second language. They, however, do speak Spanish. It's so quick and easy to do, and you give it to them in Spanish
Yeah.
or whatever language, maybe French, and they're aware that you don't speak it. They're aware that some things are going to be a little bit scattered in that. But what you're doing is trying to bring it to them at their level and what they need that way. So I've given you lots of different options there,
Yeah.
and you could manually do them all, but you can automate a lot of that once you're clear on it.
Oh boy, there's a lot to dig into there. What I love about what you characterized is that you can create a specific set of processes with defined tools and have parameters on how you deliver advisory, financials, how you deliver information to your client. Now, within the context of how you set up that process, there are a variety of means and tools you can utilize to accomplish that. But it's more important to understand how to meet the client where they're at, how they best learn, how they best digest information, what format would be most conducive to a relationship with them, and then take that input and format it in a way that makes sense. To your point, there's ChatGPT, there's I use 11 Labs for the voice changing and transcripting and things like that. I believe in today's age, one, let me highlight that it is uh, a security measure or should be a
Mm,
security measure to ensure that you're safeguarding all of your client data. So don't just throw it into a large language model without understanding how and why and where that data is being used. But
absolutely. Yeah,
there's a lot
absolutely.
of ways to accomplish that. So once you have that information, you understand how a client wants to be communicated with, how they best learn and operate. What's kind of the next step in that relationship? Is it just taking that format and just recreating it every single month?
I guess it's going to be having human conversations with them, being available for human conversations, and yes, repeating that on a regular basis, but making sure that humans being humans sometimes will get really, really involved with it, and sometimes they're going to ghost you, which seems
Mhm.
to be the common term at the moment. And that's just because their life is getting busy. Um, and it may be that the kind of next level of that advisory piece is you say, okay, this is I never want to make a decision for a client. Never, never make a decision for a client, but I will put the information in front of them. If they're not making decisions that make sense to them, I may make sort of have that contact them directly about something in terms of what it is and saying, look, are you sure about this? Can we double check on that? Um, but I do think it's not overwhelming them in the information, creating the bespoke information, and trying to avail yourself to conversations. And that can be challenging, but we've got them, like, I've assumed that we've got them signed up for a ongoing subscription.
Mhm.
So they're paying us for it, and we really want to encourage them. They get so much more out of having a one-on-one human meeting, but they're not always. I don't know why, but well, we've talked why, but they're not always prepared to do that.
Yeah. So I like the idea of my clients feeling like I'm always available, feeling like I'm always here to answer an email, that the team will be responsive within an hour of receiving an email. Fact of the matter is that's just not
Mm.
possible for every client. We would be setting up ourselves for failure if we had this open communication policy and didn't instill guidelines and frameworks on how we communicate with clients. Do you have specific recommendations on how to best accomplish that, given the understanding of how we now know clients like to be communicated with and receive information? What does that next step look like? What do we parameter meeting times, number of outreaches, responses? Is there technology to help with that? I need
I
help.
think I think very much that starts at the very beginning in the engagement letter and the explanation around the engagement in terms of what the boundaries are. And boundaries are very, very important. And um, uh, of course, some businesses don't work the 9 to 5 and they're available at different times. But then what you need to do is understand, are you prepared to do that? Or is that are there what do you call it, surcharges, like the Uber
Sure.
surcharge? Are you charging extra for that? I went to book an Uber the other day and I was slow. It was like 30 seconds too slow and the price doubled,
Ugh.
but I still had to pay for it. Like so that is involved in terms of, if you're submitting information late, then you're not meeting your part of the arrangement. Um, but very much in the engagement letter, uh, I require, part of our contract is I require this information but from you by the dates I specify them, and I am available to you within these timeframes. And outside of that, then how are you navigating that? Is that you have a offshore team that can work around the clock, or is that you have extra charges? But I do think boundaries, you're prepared to pay for your Uber surcharge, so put in extra costs around that, and um, don't burn out.
Yeah.
We just don't want burning out. And I wonder to that, Roman, does Financial Sense have solutions in there for that sort of boundary element?
It's interesting within the context of a workflow management system. Everybody approaches it slightly differently. From our experience with Financial Sense, we very meticulously control outbound communications to clients because we don't want them inundated with requests on a daily, weekly basis. We want it to be very controlled, and so we're able to control that element of that. The challenge is outside of our workflow management system, within the realm of one-off requests that come in. Hey, can you rush my financials this month? Hey, I've got a big project that came up. Hey, can you answer these questions, update the model? And it's difficult to understand, if I'm not very granular in the scoping process and the engagement process, how to handle those one-off requests. And that can be a tremendous time suck within
Mm.
the realm of a subscription.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a constant learning curve, isn't it?
It is. It is. What are your thoughts around chatbots and automated tools to help with one-off requests that come through and people chat a bot?
Yeah, look, it makes a lot of sense to have a sort of a ring fence chatbots that can handle the data or the information securely, and work on providing those simple human responses where relevant. And if that takes off the easy level, then definitely something to use. And I know that when I go on sites, I'm completely happy to use those.
Hmm.
um, that's the first level. The next level, if I'm not getting the responses, then hopefully I can access a human.
Yeah, what's been interesting to me is that over the last 12, maybe 18 months, I've observed with the vendors and the technology partners that we use that they've all instilled intercom or some type of tool that will help search a database, an internal database that they have on really any Q&A. And so I can just pop open a chat box, and ask a question, and then usually get that question answered via something that they've already published. If it can't, then I can direct connect to a human. So I'm
Mm.
wondering to what degree accounting firms should have something like that to enable more quick responses, take that top tier off. Is there anything in the market that you've observed that is helpful like that?
One of the things that I would do is educate the clients on uh, where to find the support from the software that they're using and how to
Mm,
access the support from the software they're using. Many cases, as the accountants, yeah, sure, we perhaps know the answer, but when they have a problem with how to do something in QuickBooks or Xero, empower them to find the answer themselves. What's it? Teach someone to fish, Don't fish for them, or don't give them the fish. So very much empower them that way. And again, if I hear a lot of stories that dealing with your tax office is challenging, as is dealing with our tax office is challenging. And to those higher level complex things, that's when the humans come involved, I guess.
Yeah, it's just difficult to understand how to best manage those things. I had a client request several weeks ago. Can you send me trailing 12-month financials? And in my head, I'm thinking, oh, you could just log into QuickBooks and do this yourself, right? And I facilitated the request. I then created a relationship with my client that these one-off requests I'll just answer anytime, and that's not the type of
Mm,
response that's maybe appropriate. And what you're recommending, and I think I need to do this myself, but also let's create a framework of how to self-serve and how to answer your own questions that may also result in you being able to have a more expedited response because you know how to accomplish this thing. And it
yeah.
helps educate our clients too.
Absolutely. And with that question, that query that came in, so I would have potentially thought of doing two things. First one is respond using a Loom video, which shows them how to do it. Don't do it for them, shows them how to do it. And the second one is create a generic Loom video that is now part of your
Mm,
information source that might even go up as a blog post, that might even go out in the next newsletter to inform people how to do it, because you sort of just constantly, my thoughts are constantly push that education out to the client base. And if that one person wants it, well, maybe 5% of your clients would benefit from it. And in an email, like you probably send out a monthly newsletter, that's something that's of interest to them, but also sitting there as, oh, this is how I search for it. I hadn't even thought of that, but it's going to be useful for me.
that's a great way to take common questions that you receive and then create an asset out of it. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't think like that because most accounts, if they do have a newsletter, the day before the newsletter is supposed to go out, they're feverishly typing, and there isn't that existing bank of opportunity to pull from into creating content in a
Oh,
newsletter.
absolutely. And that essentially is how I started my YouTube channel. Was people would ask me questions, and I create a video, and my channel's got like 11,000 subscribers now, and I actually earn money from people viewing how to do videos. And people,
Huh.
I still see people going, "Oh, the video I made like 10 years ago." They go in and they share it with the community when people ask about questions. So putting it out there. The other thing about putting it up and online is people now know your voice. They now know how you
Mhm.
talk. They now know how you respond to people. And if they're feeling, oh, I'm going to be a silly person for talking to these people, I now feel comfortable. I have a warm relationship with that person, and I feel more engaged about going and becoming a client of that person. So it is almost edutainment and
Mhm.
advertising in sort of an educational way.
Yeah, and I can 100% agree with that from the content that I've published online. By giving yourself a voice and giving yourself a platform that other people can, self-select into, that
Yeah.
then enables far more comfortability in the sales process to have a discussion because somebody knows how you talk. They kind of know how you think. And so
Yeah.
that then moves into the client experience in a much more smooth fashion than had they come in completely cold from the beginning.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think both you and I have a very distinct brand about our personality, and that will resonate with people. And that's great because it kind of like they feel comfortable. I've had ladies ring me up and said, "Can you come and help me? I'm going to breastfeed during the session. Are you okay with that?" I'm like, "Of course I'm okay with it. Of course I'm okay with it." But you can understand not everyone would be, and I completely get that. So the brand personality resonates with people, and you are not going to be liked by everyone, and
Yeah,
that's okay. There's plenty of people out there who need help, and we're all we're all running at capacity. So it's completely fine to just attract the people you really who are going to work well with you and understand how you work.
I love it. I love it. So if we were to distill this conversation down into the top 3 things to be thinking about as it relates to personalizing client experiences. The first one is understanding how a client learns how they prefer to engage with information. What are the other 2 things you'd recommend?
Um, be be as human as you possibly can while having boundaries in place, by having really, really strict boundaries in place. And every time you see the boundaries breaking down work out ways how you can automate that. So I want to use as much technology as possible while still being able to peep over that and being the most human person as possible. And
And
I'm
then
going to
one more.
say, this isn't another one, but this is just a tip to the newsletter. I think Laurelyn Wilson, is it Wilson?
Wilson.
She puts out a newsletter that helps you generate your own newsletter if you do need to generate a newsletter. But I always say to people to sign up to my accounting apps newsletter because it has lots of content that, again, you can grab and repurpose in your own newsletter.
I love that. And it's at the end of the day, it's a delightful blend between utilizing technology really well, really efficiently, while also retaining a high degree of personal human touch to reach people where they're at. It's
Absolutely.
beautiful. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. Fantastic. Well, Heather, A, I love this conversation and we could go on for another hour.
We
B,
could.
you also have a lot going on and a lot of ways that people can find you, reach you, consume content that you create. What are the best mediums for people to find you?
I encourage you to connect with me on LinkedIn as Heather Smith. And what I do have is this accounting apps newsletter, which I'm very excited about. I kind of stumbled across it across the platform a number of years ago. And what it does is it pulls in all the blog posts across the world about accounting technology. So I review 700 blog posts and I then curate that down to about 70 blog posts. It then sends you, the subscriber, a bespoke 15 post newsletter based on what you clicked on in the past. And it generates this newsletter that is actually really, really relevant to you. And every newsletter is different. So it kind of is bringing in this bespokeness and that customer experience into the newsletter. So I have a really high open rate on that newsletter. It's very simple, Accounting Apps newsletter, and it's news about accounting technology from around the world. So that's very exciting. And of course, you're welcome to join my Accounting Apps community and listen to the Accounting Apps podcast.
Perfect. Well, I think many people will be looking for you after this. I appreciate your time and conversation today.
Thank you so much, Roman. It's been so much fun to be on the show with you. And thank you to Financial Sense and yourself for inviting me.
Absolutely. For listening in today. If you enjoyed this podcast, share and write a review. This is going to help other firm owners just like you find our podcast and get insights into how to grow their firm. Stay tuned.